Hello and welcome back. I'm Mr. Kennedy, and today we will be thinking about Russia and Japan in the 19th century. Some thinkers argue that the period from 1800 to 1914 was one of European success. The Enlightenment developed Europe's arts and sciences. Revolutions from 1789 to 1848 rebuilt social and political structures. Industrialization sped the economy, and imperialism provided raw materials, labor, access to new cultural forces, and new economic markets. But success is in quotation marks because all of this progress came with a cost. Enlightenment and revolution weakened traditional structures. Industrialization enriched the powerful while oppressing the minority. And imperialism, soaked in racism, objectified and exploited millions of non-Europeans. In that context, what would you have done? Imagine then, as a nation outside of Europe, what are your choices? You don't want to be the victim of imperial dominance. You want to develop your military power and economic power, and most of all, you want to claim a place in the politics of the world. Be a part of the progress. One of the most straightforward ways of doing this, and one way that some countries chose, was to try to copy Europe's success. We'll look quickly at two examples of states that tried that strategy and tried to emulate Europe: Russia and Japan. Both countries attempted to adapt the four successes I introduced earlier, but they were not congruent copies of Europe. Russia and Japan weren't like Europe in 1850. They had different problems, different situations, so they had different results and didn't end up exactly like Europe in 1914. Still, both Russia and Japan managed some success, if not without cost. Let's go over Russia first. So some of the differences that Russia faced in 1850 was that it was still very agricultural when compared to Europe. More than 3/4 of the population were farmers, mostly serfs, and that arrangement contributed to a rigid social structure with a ruling aristocracy, a very small middle class, and then serfs in the bottom. Finally, compared to the development of constitutional monarchies in Western Europe, the Russian czars were autocratic, holding almost all the power themselves. While Russia succeeded in improving its military and developing urban industrial centers, those difficulties we just talked about made it hard for Russia to transform its economy. By 1914, 2/3 of the population was still in agriculture, limiting industrial development. While the serfs technically won their freedom, they were still at the bottom of an aristocratically dominated social system. Combined with generally poor living standards and oppression from the autocratic government, many Russians turned to alternative politics, like communism and anarchy, plunging Russia into a cycle of social unrest. People revolted because of political and social oppression. The government repressed the revolt, causing more oppression, more social unrest. It was a vicious cycle. In Japan, the country limited Western interaction to one area of one city, which was possible because of their geographic isolation. However, as European power in East Asia grew, Japan tried to adopt some Western methods. Like in Russia, it's important to recognize some of the differences between Japan and Europe. First, compared to the revolutions that seemed commonplace in Europe in the 1800s, Japan's Tokugawa shogunate was quite stable, both politically and socially. Economically, Japan was poor in raw materials like lumber, food, and iron. Perhaps to their advantage, Japan had a tradition of adopting culture from China and Korea. Japan's differences allowed it to make significant changes to its economy and society by 1914. Partly because of social stability, Japan managed to transition to a constitutional monarchy with only limited civil war, a restoration instead of revolution. Since raw materials were unavailable, Japan focused on manufacturing, and their tradition of adoption meant that they started using Western techniques quickly. Hopefully, this gives you a basic idea of some of the key difference in westernization between Russia and Japan. It's not meant to cover everything, but kind of introduce that main theme of there being differences in how those processes of European successes played out in different places. But before I go, I'd like to go back to the costs that I mentioned earlier. Remember, these things don't come for free, and a significant part of the price of Japan's success was paid by Korea. As a colony of Japan, Korea was forced into the same kind of unequal relationship suffered by European territories. We have to remember it as a reminder to think carefully before racing towards progress. That's it for this week. I'll see you later when we talk about the introduction to Part 5, 1914 to the present. Bye.